we go. Okay, wonderful. Okay, well, we've got lots of chopping to do today, so I think we should get started. And if anyone wants to hop on in a couple minutes, they can jump in wherever we're at. So, oh, there's Anne. Give her a minute to connect to the audio. Wonderful. All right. Hi, Anne. Welcome.
Hi, Laura. Hi, everybody.
Thanks so much for being here. And you missed my disclaimer that I am recording this session so that it can be posted later for anyone who can't be here. So your video does not appear in the recording. If you speak, it will record your voice though. Okay, so make sure everyone's clear. Okay, so like I was saying, we have lots of chopping, so let's get started. So today we are going to make a vegetable soup. I love this soup because it's a really great way to use up vegetables that are looking kind of sad in your refrigerator. And it's really amazing how much flavor you get out of so few ingredients, I think. I mean, it is more ingredients than some of the other recipes we've done, but for the depth of flavor and the amount of, vitamins and nutrients you get, I think it's a really amazing recipe. So this recipe is from the Oshie Glow's Everyday Cookbook. These cookbooks are by Angela Liddon. She's actually Canadian. She lives in Oakville, so not too far from home. And she started her career as a recipe writer with a blog. And it was in kind of the early days of internet blogging. And she was one of the first totally vegan blogs. So this is a vegan soup. And this cookbook is all vegan recipes. So this is her second cookbook. Her third one just came out this year. I highly recommend all of them. They're really excellent recipes. They have lots of flavor. They use real ingredients, and they're pretty simple to make. So I'll just find the one that we're going to be making today, which is called 6 Vegetable and Cheese Soup. So this recipe, there's a slightly different version on her website that I will share with you all right now so that you can follow along if you like. The one that's in the cookbook is slightly different, and this is the one, I think the only difference is that on her website, she calls for squash, and in the cookbook, she calls for sweet potato. So you can use whatever you have. I actually am going to use butternut squash today because I had some in the freezer and I want to use it up. So I will send you the online version of this recipe right now. This is what it looks like. She has it prettied up with croutons and pumpkin seeds on top, which we're not going to make together, but if you have the time and the inclination afterwards to add some croutons, highly recommend it. It's delicious. So this is the cookbook. If you like this recipe, Oshie Glows Every Day. Her first cookbook is Oshie Glows. And I think the third one is Oshie Glows for Dinner. And it's all supposed to be dinner recipes. So highly, highly recommend these. Just give me one moment to send you the recipe. So I will put the link in our chat. So if you would like to open that up and follow along instead of just listening to me, just click on that link and it'll open it hopefully in a new window for you. Okay, so let's get started. So I'll just go through quickly the ingredients I have in front of me and the tools. So I've got 2 carrots. I had frozen broccoli to use up. So this very sad bag of frozen broccoli. There's probably about a small head. So that's great. Like I said, I had frozen butternut squash in the fridge, in the freezer, sorry. This is an awesome thing to buy if you see it, because it is so easy to throw into soups or to roast in the oven for a quick side dish. And I love butternut squash, but I find peeling it really onerous and sometimes difficult. So this, it comes peeled and chopped. So I highly recommend these if you ever see them at the store. I have an onion. I think I would usually use a yellow onion for this recipe, but red's what I have, so I'm using it up. I have a head of garlic, which we're going to use. I think it's 3 cloves of garlic. I should leave this recipe open. That would be helpful. And then I have some sad celery that's been in my crisper for too long. But that's one of the things I love about this recipe. It's very easy to use up those old sad vegetables. I also have white wine vinegar, which we're going to use at the end to finish. If you don't have white wine vinegar, fresh lemon juice is another great option, or bottled lemon juice. Anything acidic, just to give it a little more flavor at the end. I have a little bit of oil that we're going to use to saute our vegetables. I also have, this is another product. I'm not getting paid, I swear, but I love this product. So instead of buying my own soup, instead of making my own soup broth, which I wish I did that, but I often don't. I'm often not organized enough, and I have a very tiny freezer, so it doesn't happen. So usually I have to buy cubes or boxed broth. This is called Better Than Bouillon, and it's like I have an elastic on it because it is a little hard to open the jar. It's like a paste, and it's very concentrated, and you just mix that with water and it makes the most wonderful vegetable broth. This is the vegetable flavor. I often use the chicken flavor as well, and I just love it. It's a little more expensive than the cubes, but like I said, the flavor is really lovely, and it's a lot more convenient than having big boxes. So if you haven't tried Better Than Bouillon, it is at Sobeys, I think. It's not at every store, but I think Sobeys does have it. So I recommend trying that out as well. In terms of spices, this is another thing I love about this recipe is it's very flavorful, and I don't need to measure a ton of spices. So I've got ground cayenne for a little bit of a kick. And this is our fun mystery ingredient. So this is called nutritional yeast. There was a note on Eventbrite that if you couldn't find nutritional yeast, don't worry about it. It will still be a delicious soup without it. This is a really cool ingredient that adds kind of a cheesy flavor. It's often used in vegan cooking and cheese sauces, dips. It also is a really great source of B12. So if you are eating a plant-based diet, B12 can be a hard thing to get enough of because it's mostly found, I think, in animal products. I hope I'm thinking of the right vitamin. So this is really great if you or anyone you know are trying to eat more plant-based foods. This is it's a great flavor booster, and it's a great vitamin booster as well. This bag, I think, is just from the health food aisle. I do find this is a lot easier to find than it was a couple years ago. But if you are having trouble finding it, it's also at Bulk Barn. So if anyone's trying nutritional yeast for the first time today, I'm very excited for you. And I'd love to hear what you think of it. But like I said, if you don't have it, if you couldn't find it at the store, it's still going to be a great recipe even without it. Okay. All right. Let me just get this recipe open. I closed it. That was silly. So I know I'm not missing any steps on you guys. I just love this cookbook. I want to talk about all the soups. Like I write notes, things I really love. This one I love. This is a cabbage-based soup. This is another creamy soup. I know it's not fun to watch me look at them, but I can't recommend this cookbook enough. There's so many good ones in here. In terms of tools, I have my cutting board, my knife. I have a big shallow pan. Any pot will work. I like this one because it's got a nice wide base, so it'll make it it'll distribute the heat a little better. But any pot you have is great as long as it fits everything. I'm going to use this Pyrex to mix up my broth. If you're using canned or boxed broth, you don't need that, of course. I also have here, way in the back is a blender. So this is a blended soup. So we'll need either a blender or an immersion blender, which mine's over here. I can grab it. It's this guy. So immersion blender will work just as well. It'll just maybe take a little longer, which is why I'm gonna do the slightly more dangerous task of pouring the hot soup into the actual stand blender. All right, I think that's everything. I don't think I've forgotten any of the ingredients. I'm just looking quickly. Yeah, I think let's get started. That's wonderful. Oh, the only thing I don't have out here is salt and pepper, which I'll grab in a second. And we will add salt and pepper to taste. Okay, so let's start with our carrots. Nope, sorry, I changed my mind. We're gonna start with the onion because the onion needs the longest to cook in the pan. So let's start by chopping up our onion. Oh, this onion's a little mushy. I'm gonna grab a different one. Sorry, everybody. That is one of the hazards of cooking at home with the old ingredients. I buy these big bags of onions and sometimes I get through them all before they go and sometimes I don't. So I switched to a yellow onion because I also had yellow onions. The red onions were, like I said, I was trying to use them up, but that one was past its prime. So let's not this one. Another tip, I know, don't follow my own advice, is to get a bowl for all your food waste, so you're not running back and forth to the garbage. So I'm going to grab a bowl. Just because that'll help keep my workstation nice and neat. All my onions in the bowl. For a while, I was saving all my onion skins because you can use them for natural dyeing projects. They will apparently dye fabric or wool a really lovely pale yellow or brown color. So the beginning of the pandemic, that'll be a fun project. So I very carefully saved all my onion skins and then I didn't do anything with them. So I just have skins floating around. Maybe one day. One day I'll try that natural dye project. Okay, and as for cutting the onion, I'm just doing dice. This is a little bit on the small side. It's all gonna go in the blender, which is another reason I love this recipe. Your vegetables don't have to be cut in a way that's very pretty. So just whatever's fastest for you. I'm gonna leave them a little bit larger than that, that's fine. Okay. My onions cut. I'm going to heat up some oil. I believe the recipe calls for olive oil. I'm still using my safflower oil, just the natural oil. I'm gonna just put in enough to cover the bottom of the pan and tip it around. And then in go my onions. I'm gonna grab also this is a fun thing I noticed people doing on Cookbook. So this is my dough scraper. I can use that to lift up all my onions. And I don't have to get quite as much onion on my hand, which is nice. So onions are just gonna go in there. And we're gonna let them while we chop everything else. Okay, and then we have 3 cloves of garlic. So the recipe calls for these to be minced, but like I said, this is all going in a blender. So depending on your space in your blender, if you trust that your blender will actually blend everything up for you, you could, I'm just gonna smash them. I'm not gonna dice them or mince them. Mince is small. See if I can get this garlic apart. It does not want to be eaten. Oh my goodness, the stem on this garlic. These are nice big cloves. Oh my goodness. How big that garlic is. Okay, so because these are so huge, I'm just gonna do 2. And like I said, I'm just gonna smash them. I was gonna say lazy, but that's not the right word. It's work smarter, not harder, right? So I am going to peel those. A different kind of garlic than I usually buy. Skins are very thick. There we go. Okay, and all I'm gonna do is smash this with the side of my knife. And a bunch of little pieces, which is great. That can go in with the onion. That up to get it hot. The onion smells making my eyes water. I don't think I've ever had such a hard time peeling a clove of garlic. And I'm sure it's because I'm on video and being recorded. It's just a very thick. A little bit off. Okay. Smash the garlic. Scoop it up. And you go. All right, and I'm a big fan of seasoning as you go. So let's add some salt. Even just the onions and garlic, just a tiny bit. Because we're gonna have a much tastier soup if everything is flavored with a little bit of salt.
Sorry, I missed that. Could you say it again, please?
Oh, Siri is speaking to me. I wonder why. Let me go turn that off. No, I had Siri turned on my phone. All right, we'll keep my plastic bowl away from the stove. Another lesson I learned the hard way. Okay, and now that we've got our onion and garlic cooking, now we can chop our carrots and onion. Sorry, carrots, celery. Already chopped our onion. Carrots and celery. And then if you were doing sweet potato and broccoli, not from frozen, now would be the time to chop those as well. So I would peel first, unless you have a very powerful blender, in which case you can just leave the peel on and keep all those nutrients in. Any questions so far? That's great. Now that we're chopping the other vegetables, this is especially where it's so nice to not have to chop them all evenly or beautifully. They should be roughly the same size so that they cook at the same rate. I'm chopping very small. We could definitely be leaving these a little larger. Even a chunk that big, that's a great size for this recipe. Mind you, again, it depends how much faith you have in your blender. If your blender's going to struggle a little bit, smaller pieces are going to make it easier to blend your soup. Okay, I'm just going to check on my onions. They sound okay. They sound a little dry. Okay, and then once my carrot's chopped, it can go right in. Yeah, if you read the actual recipe carefully, it says to have everything chopped before you start cooking, which is, you know, the more professional way to cook, and certainly more streamlined, but I am not the most mentally organized person, so I do not worry about that. I chop as I'm cooking. Again, this is a tiny carrot, so I'm going to make it's about that big. Okay. The recipe calls for a cup of celery, which is about 2 to 3 stalks. So here we go. At the end. I'm just going to leave the celery leaves on. I think the taste of celery leaves is lovely. I love the smell of them. So they can go in and we'll just treat them like an herb. Don't have leaves on your celery though, not to worry. You know what? I only really have 2 stalks left, so I'm just going to throw them in because the celery is really on its last legs. Okay, so I've got my celery and carrot in. Give a little stir. Now will be the time to cut up your broccoli and your sweet potatoes. And my frozen broccoli. I used up that bag of broccoli for a long time, so that's an accomplishment. So like the recipe calls for 1 head of broccoli. I maybe have a little bit less than that, or enough for a small head of broccoli, but mine also is going to take just a little bit longer to cook, since I'm starting with a frozen vegetable. Great, I have my lovely butternut squash. The recipe calls for 2 cups of sweet potato, which it says is about 1 small sweet potato. So I'll probably do about a handful of the butternut squash. I'm gonna put this back in the freezer for it to frost anymore and clumps together. So like I said, love this product, highly recommend it. And at this point, I'm going to add some more salt and pepper. Like I said, I want every stage of the recipe to have flavor. If this was a recipe with lots of spices, now would be the best time, in my opinion, to be adding them so that the spices do get toasted. That's something I've learned this year. It does make an enormous amount of difference to your cooking if you have spices, instead of just putting them in and stirring them in, actually cooking the spices and allowing those flavors to release, like I said, makes an enormous difference. Okay, so now I need 6 cups of broth. My Pyrex is 4 cups. I'm using Better Than Bouillon, which I think it is a teaspoon per cup. Yeah, so I'll need 4 teaspoons of Pyrex, and then I need, I'm just gonna eyeball this because it's running a little low. All right, I'm just gonna step away and fill this up with water. Depending on what recipe I would make, I should probably stir this really well to make sure the broth base, the concentrate is mixed with the water. But again, because this is a blended soup, I'm not going to worry about it too much. As long as it all gets into the pot, that's really all I care about. All right, my vegetables are all nice and toasty, hanging out. Oh dear, that's a horrible splash. See, and I've left all my concentrate behind, so let's just make sure it's in there.
Sorry, Laura, how much liquid, how much broth is that?
This was 4 cups. I'm going to add 2 more.
4
So the
cups.
recipe
Okay.
calls for 6 cups.
Okay, thanks.
If you have the cartons of broth, those are usually 4 cups, I think. So you need 1.5. If you only have 1 carton, that's fine. It'll just be slightly. Here's my 2 more cups. I've got enough of the concentrate in there. I don't need more. Up my mess. Okay. And now I'm going to turn my heat up to high and bring this to a boil. And this is a great time to do some tidying up. Let's pour cloth out of the way. And that's some of my bouillon concentrate behind my spoon, so make sure it all gets in there. And what are we doing? So the recipe calls for the soup to come to a low boil for 12 to 15 minutes. So like I said, I'm just going to tidy up and we'll just let those vegetables cook. Way. Cutting board. Board go away. Another way, if you were really in a hurry making this recipe, is I could have started with boiling water to make my broth, but that would have just not added that much time. It only feels long because I'm being recorded, I think. Really, I love how quick this recipe is. It's just starting to boil. Stop taking the lid on and off. That would be helpful. This is also why on cooking shows they have, you know, a duplicate dish ready to go, and then they pull it out. But we're live here, so we just have to wait. I guess while we're waiting, I can tell you about a couple more of the recipes that I really love in this cookbook. Where to start? They're all so good. I find her soups are really excellent. So just as a reminder, we're talking about the Oshie Glow's Everyday Cookbook. I just find, I think it's because it might, you know, I think sometimes there's this idea that something's tasty despite being vegan, but I think that these soups are especially good because they are so focused on the flavors of the vegetables. This one's really lovely. This says, this is a spicy soup with cabbage. You can see I wrote a big note. I really like that one. And what she uses for that soup is a really wonderful spice blend. Let me see if I can find it. On page 258. So see, I've got a note on this one too. I obviously love it. This is a blend of spices. It's really easy to throw together, just to keep a big jar handy, and I use it for all kinds of things. So it's sweet paprika, garlic powder, dried minced onion, salt, pepper, oregano, turmeric, thyme, and smoked paprika. So it would be a lot if you were pulling out every one of those spices every time. It's almost like a chili powder, but a little less spicy and just wonderful. So this is the spice mix that makes that cabbage soup so flavorful. So I highly recommend that. I also just saw mac and peas. Let's see if I can find it again. So if you've invested in nutritional yeast to try for this recipe, another recipe I really recommend is this vegan mac and peas. So it's macaroni with peas, obviously, is where the name comes from, but doesn't have any cheese. So she actually does this really lovely cheese sauce that's made of carrots, potatoes, and nutritional yeast. And obviously it's not the same as cheese, but if you're looking for like a lighter midday meal, this is really lovely and full of secret vegetables. So if you know any toddlers who don't want to eat vegetables, this is also a great way to sneak some nutrients into their diet. Those are ones that I really recommend. Her smoothies are wonderful. Her dips are wonderful. Here's a picture. Here's Angela. It's funny how our cookbook, for me, cookbook authors feel like friends because I've made so many of their recipes. So like I said, can't say enough good things about this cookbook. All right. My soup, I don't want to overflow, so I'm just going to down. All right, that's simmering nicely. Lost my page again. Okay. So because my squash was cut so tiny and because my carrots were cut quite small, this says cover and simmer for 12 to 15 minutes or until your vegetables are fork tender. So if the vegetables are cooked, I can go ahead and blend it. So another reason this recipe is great. So if I'm rushing, we're fine. Oh yeah, they're very tender. So fork tender just means I can poke a fork through the squash, which I can do, no problem. Let's make sure the broccoli's cooked. Oh yeah, that's great. All right, so now, shall I try to do this on camera? Pour the hot soup into the blender. Let's see if I can pull it off. Blender. The other reason I chose this pot is because it has this handle on it. Okay, I want this to be. Sorry. You know what? Nope, not brave enough. I'm gonna ladle most of it and then I'll pour what I can't get from the ladle. So any of you, if you're still chopping, don't worry. I really took some shortcuts with this recipe that made it extra fast. So please don't feel like you're behind if you're not already at the blending stage.
Are we gonna blend it in the pot, Laura?
So if you have an immersion blender, Katie, then you will blend it in the pot. Yeah.
Yes, I do. Okay.
So I'm going to use my other kind of blender just because that's
Okay.
easier for me, but you're going to get the same result either way. So I know you said
Okay, thank you.
I know you said you have an immersion blender. So when your vegetables are cooked, that's when you're going to blend them in the pot. Okay.
Okay. All right.
That I am, there's a hair. Let's get that over there. Transferring over. Let's just get rid of that noise. Okay, and if you're using an immersion blender, like I said, you could just go ahead and do that in the pot. If you're using this kind of blender, make sure there's a way for your steam to escape as you're blending. Otherwise, it is going to make, you have the chance that your blender lid will pop off and make a giant mess. So I'm going to pour the rest of this over the sink. Like I said, I'm not brave enough to do it on the counter. Be right back.
Laura,
Yes.
do we take the pot off the stove when we blend it?
Yes, I would take the pot, just move it to a burner that's not on, just so you
Okay,
don't burn yourself.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Okay,
And yeah, and turn the original burner off.
okay, thanks.
Okay, here's my very full blender. Also, Katie, make sure all your vegetables are fully cooked before you try to blend them. Did you
Okay, thanks.
do the fork test to make sure you can poke them easily with a fork?
Yeah, the other ones are good. The sweet potatoes maybe need a little bit longer.
Yeah, so just leave them a little bit longer. You don't have to blend at the same time as me. I would let
Okay.
them cook, otherwise you're gonna have a crunchy soup, which may be fine,
Okay.
but that's not what we're aiming for here. Okay, and I'm gonna turn my blender on. It's gonna be a little loud for a moment, so my apologies. And you'll see I've taken this off because I want to let steam escape. Okay, I've got it mostly blended. I've got my blender a little full, so I might blend it in 2 batches. Just because it's making me a little bit nervous. There we go. Okay, and now it's time to season our soup. So it doesn't like that I was blending into the microphone. Fair enough. So sorry I had to listen to that. I am going to add my nutritional yeast at this point. So I'm going to get a tablespoon and I'm going to add 3 tablespoons. So Katie, if you've already started blending, you can still add this at any point. I just like to get it started first. So 3 tablespoons. Now I'm going to add the cayenne. Cayenne is very spicy. I really love spicy food, so I'm going to add maybe half a teaspoon. The recipe calls for a 1/4 teaspoon. And if you are not a big fan of spice, I wouldn't add more than that. But it does add like a really lovely warmth and depth of flavor. So if you like spice, you can add a little bit more. All right, and now I'm just going to blend in my seasoning. Lovely golden color. That's another reason this is a great soup. It's vegetable. I think it's very pretty. All back in together. And now I'm gonna add salt and pepper to taste. So the best thing to do, of course, is to taste the soup before you decide how much salt you need to add. I know I like lots of pepper, so I'm just gonna go ahead and add that. And I'm also gonna add my splash of white wine vinegar. The recipe calls for 1 to 2 teaspoons. So there's my tablespoon. I'm gonna do just less than half a tablespoon. And that vinegar, it's just a tiny amount at the end. It really adds a lot of brightness and flavor. I can never get over how much it changes the final recipe. All right. And there's our vegetable soup. This is such a great easy recipe. This is one that I bring to new moms. This is one I make, anytime you're bringing food to someone, this is such a great one because it's full of nutrients. It's really easy to eat. It's tasty and it's pretty quick to make. So if you're in a pinch, it's a great option. All right. I hope everyone's close to being done. If you're not, and you have any questions, please let me know. But otherwise, thank you so much for being here. It's been so lovely to cook together today. And I hope
Thank you again, Laura.
Oh, thanks, Katie. Thanks for coming. I hope your soups are delicious. Any questions before we go?
No, but that was great. Thanks.
Okay, awesome. So lovely to have you all here. Thanks so much. And we'll see you next week. Next week, we're doing a very easy cobbler cake. It's also sometimes known as a dump cake, but that's not the nicest name. So I don't think I advertised it that way because it's a bit yucky sounding. So I will send out an email with this full recipe attached. And if you'd like to sign up for next week, it should be open. If not, it'll be open later today. And hopefully I'll see you then. All right. Bye, everybody. Thanks for being here.